Wine is culture, but it is often depicted in an old-fashioned way that makes it appear less relevant today. This is why I was excited to see that a cult wine comic was turned into a series on Apple TV. So who's ready to watch the Drops of God show with me to find out whether it's any good? Let's go. The manga The Drops of God was first published in 2004, and over the years it has become a favorite among wine nerds. So of course I own some first edition prints, being the master of wine nerds. In the manga, Shizuku Kansaki, a young beer professional, has to battle wine expert Issei Tomine in 13 blind tastings in order to win his deceased father's wine collection. Shizuku doesn't know anything about wine, and in order to get his inheritance he has to learn everything he can. And the reader, of course, learns alongside the protagonists. The story is generally the same in the TV adaptation, but for whatever reason, the main protagonist is not a Japanese man, but a French woman called Camille Léger, and there were some other aspects that were shifted around. Camille is a struggling writer who had a falling out with her father, the famous enologist and wine critic Alexandre Léger. But let's watch it together. I'm only going to cover the first 2 episodes today, so let's go. So the show is in English, French and Japanese with subtitles, and I'm going to watch it on my phone, like most people do nowadays, I guess.
Mr. Tomine, we'd like you to identify this wine as best as you can.
So this is Issei Tomine, and this is kind of the situation that everyone knows who ever had to do a tasting test.
それは僕の人生のすべて。ワインに限っては誰にも負けない。少なくともそう信じてきた。そして彼女が現れた。
So in the next scene, young Camille Léger is introduced, and they show a session where the father gives the daughter something to taste in order to train her blind tasting abilities. And this is also part of the whole story why they had a falling out. What is really great about this show is the way they visualize blind tastings, and I think this scene shows it really, really well.
Concentre-toi. Essaye d'imaginer le goût. C'est dans ta tête. Tu le sais.
This is so cool, I think. I definitely have to practice that with my daughters as well. So funny. But yeah, I really like the way they show what's going on in your head, even though that's obviously not how it works necessarily, but it's a great approach. In the next scenes, you can see that Camille doesn't drink alcohol, and if she does, she gets nosebleeding and passes out. So you know that something is wrong and that this might have something to do with her father. She then gets a message that her father is dying and is asked to come on a private jet to Japan to see him for a last time. When she arrives, he's already dead, and then she's just asked to come to an office in order to hear about her inheritance. That's where she meets Issei, who's also at the notary meeting, and she hears that her father's house is worth 7 million US, and then they talk about the wine cellar.
Second part, financially speaking, at least, the heart of the legacy. I'm referring to his wine cellar, to the contents rather. It holds 87,000 bottles, the global value of which is... Sorry, I must point out that we are dealing with the biggest private wine collection in the world. I don't mean in terms of quantity of bottles, of course, but the quality, the rarity. It's an exceptional collection, simply exceptional. Where was I? Yeah, the global value, $148 million, about 16 billion yen.
Okay, that puts my collection to shame. $148 million, that's quite a lot of bottles, 87,000 bottles. That's just completely crazy. It's a bit weird though, you know, realistically speaking, which wine critic has that much money? I mean, I've never met a wine critic who made like hundreds of millions of dollars. But, well, I mean, this is obviously just a story. But it doesn't necessarily reflect the reality of being a wine critic or an enologist. But now it gets really interesting. They now hear what they have to do in order to win this inheritance.
In Mr. Léger's own words, his wine collection is the fruit of a lifetime's work. And it was crucial for him that his property should go to someone able to appreciate its full value.
I can understand that.
He set up, let's call it a test, to determine who would inherit it.
A test.
What test?
You are Alexandre Léger's daughter. Mr. Tomine, on the other hand, was one of your father's students, and Mr. Léger saw him as his spiritual son. That's why he wanted you both to battle it out.
So memories of my blind tasting exams of the Master of Wine come up, but I mean, it was quite a lot of pressure already, but it wasn't about a $150 million inheritance.
Good. Now you will both taste this wine blind. And you have 1 month to tell me exactly what it is. Grape, estate, vintage. I don't need to spell it out for you.
You're joking.
I do on occasion, but not now.
So Camille tastes and this happens. Well, she seems to have a strong sense of smell, that's for sure. So Camille decides that she's not going to go through with that, and after the funeral she wants to go home, but one of her father's friends convinces her to have a look at the wine cellar.
Yes, the smell is very strong. I'm okay.
The first person I ever met that can smell wine through the cork like that, but man. That's kind of a dream.
We are in his temple.
The temple, for sure. One day. So after seeing the cellar and watching a video that her father recorded for her, Camille realizes that he actually wants her to do this in order to get to know him better. And she kind of changes her mind and decides to go through with this. So this was episode number 1. I think it was a little bit slow, but it piqued my interest. I think the actors are well casted. The story is a little bit over exaggerated, but this is TV, so I guess that's fine. And let's move on to episode number 2 now. In the next episode, Camille travels to France to spend some time at a winery in order to learn how to blind taste. The owner is really grumpy, even though they know each other, because she spent her holidays when she was a little kid there with her father and her mother. But then she meets the hot young son of the owner and, well...
Ça va? Thomas?
Ah oui. Ah, pardon.
Of course, he's a hottie. I mean... Well, this kind of reminds me of this quote. I think it's attributed to Hugh Johnson. Wine drinkers are intelligent, sexy, and whatever. But, well, that's not really the reality. But, of course, he looks very handsome. She's very pretty. Yeah. So while Camille starts to learn something about blind tasting, we see what her opponent, Issei, is able to do in a pretty baller blind tasting.
This is all the world wine, a Bordeaux. Majority of Merlot, yes, and about 15-20% of Cabernet Sauvignon.
Okay, this is a great start. He hasn't even tasted the wine and he already knows what it is pretty much. I mean, you're not able to say whether it's 15 to 20% of Cabernet Sauvignon or Cabernet Franc in the blend just from sniffing a glass. I think you probably will not be able to tell that just from tasting the wine even. You usually know what the percentages of blends are in certain regions. So if something smells like Saint-Emilion, for example, you guess that there's quite a lot of Merlot there. There might be some Cabernet Franc or Cabernet Sauvignon in the blend to a lesser degree. And that's kind of how you come up with the cuvée. Well, but yeah, like I said, it's TV.
La Puy, 2014. No, 2017.
Ah, okay.
Cuvée. Barthélemy. So, Côte des Francs, Château Le Puy, Cuvée Barthélemy, 2017.
That's kind of the mic drop moment. I mean, if you nail a wine like that, you're the king at every party. But it's actually very difficult to, well, identify a wine blind down to the producer and even the special cuvée made by that producer. But yeah, he's quite clearly a very good taster. So next up, a doctor analyzes Camille's brain, and they come up with this thing that she is disgusted by wine for whatever reason. This is all a little bit hocus pocus bullshit, but it obviously is supposed to explain why she reacts this heavily to wine. So they realize that she is not going to be able to taste the wine, so drink it, but they kind of come up with this idea that Camille can just smell the wine and analyze it from that. So they are starting the training session.
Alors, comme je peux pas rentrer par la porte, bah, je vais passer par la fenêtre.
So this is a bit of a Le Nez du Vin advertisement. I don't know whether they paid for that, but it's the box that every wine nerd has. I at least have one of them.
La note grillée, t'as même l'animal.
L'animal?
So now she tries to identify the flavors just based on smell. To be honest, I actually got out my Le Nez du Vin because of that. I kind of thought I need to play around with it again, because what happens here is kind of cool.
Poire.
Non.
Pomme.
Non.
C'est un fruit au moins?
Eh ben non.
Oh putain.
Camille, je veux que tu t'organises. Là-dedans. Pose-toi la question. Est-ce que c'est un fruit? Une fleur? Un végétal? Une épice? Du boisé? Du grillé? Est-ce que c'est minéral? Est-ce que c'est compris?
Oui, papa.
Camille, ça va? Pose-toi les bonnes questions. Est-ce que c'est sucré? Salé? Amer? Umami? Acide? Ou une combinaison?
C'est doux. Et en même temps, j'aime pas, ça me... Réglisse.
So yeah, that's kind of cool. I think this is actually quite true, the way you have to categorize flavors in your brain in order to be able to identify them. And also the fact that those profiles stay in your head for a very long time. I think I sometimes am taken back to my childhood when I smell a certain flavor. And that is because this is very deep in your brain. And therefore, well, the fact that little Camille is kind of doing all that because she has learned it when she was a little kid is actually quite a nice picture. So while Camille gets better at blind tasting and also understands her relationship to her father better and better, we also learn that Issei has some problems with his family. They don't really support what he's doing, even though he's really good at it. he wants to become a consultant, enologist, and his family doesn't really like that because they are rich and famous and whatever, and they want him to come and be part of the family business. So that's Issei's office. He unpacks a parcel and there's some earth in that little glass from Casablanca Valley, I think it says on the jar. Of course he smells it.
Casablanca Valleyに吹き込む太平洋の朝の風を感じる。
Turns out he has this cool collection of jars with soil types from different places in the world. And now I want one of those collections too. But Grandpa doesn't like his collection and doesn't like the fact that he's participating in this blind tasting. So what a nice man. In another blind tasting, Camille travels back into her memories and realizes that her father never gave her any wine to drink and therefore wasn't responsible for her reactions to alcohol. She always had to rinse out her mouth after tasting some wine. And we also learn that he was a very tough teacher.
Lequel?
Le Beaune, donc Clos des Mouches, Maison de Rouen, 95. C'est lui, non?
Non. Celui que tu viens de goûter n'est pas un Côte de Beaune, mais un Haute Côte de Beaune. Domaine Jaille et Gilles.
Wow, that's kind of tough, telling your 6-year-old daughter that she got it completely wrong because she was in Côte de Beaune and not Haute Côte de Beaune, but well, tough teacher. So after realizing that, everything changes for Camille, and this is probably my favorite scene in the second episode.
Tout ce temps, alors que c'était moi toute seule.
Non, what?
Oh putain, mais c'est trop bon.
So while I was a bit on the fence after the first episode, I really started liking this series in the second episode. I think it's pretty cool. It's a little bit over the top for sure, but it's also really interesting. And there are some aspects there that are really great, especially the bits on blind tasting and how to approach a wine. I'm looking forward to, well, learning more about wine through this series, and I would definitely recommend it so far. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this different kind of video. If you liked it, then please like it down here. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. My question is obviously, should I do more of these? I mean, there are obviously more episodes of Drops of God. So if you want my 2 cents on the other episodes, let me know down below in the comments. But whatever you do, stay thirsty and don't get nose bleeding from tasting wine.